511, this is all about assets and the return of assets. So we're really getting into this now. So I want to go into a little bit more detail around some of these controls and what's actually required. So first of all, let's take a look at what it actually says in the standard. It states that personnel and other interested parties, as appropriate, shall return all the organisation's assets in their possession upon change or termination of their employment, contract or agreement. So why is it required? Well, of course, if someone leaves your employment, or actually, let's start at the beginning. If someone joins your organization, I'm guessing you're going to give them some devices. You'll give them some tools for the job. That might be a mobile phone. That might be a laptop. It could be any kind of asset. It might be thumb drives, USB drives, if you prefer that term. Can be anything. Shredders, perhaps, if they're working from home. You might give them a desk. You might give them a chair, a monitor, printer, that kind of thing. You might also give them, of course, keys, fobs to get into and out of your offices or your other buildings that you use and your facilities and such. So you're going to give them stuff to do their job. These are assets. Now, of course, ISO 27001 is particularly interested in your informational assets, and they're the kinds of things that we need to think about. So if you've given these assets when someone joins, it stands to reason if they change their role or if they leave your employment, then you're going to want them back. So what you need to have is a clear process which allows you to, first of all, track those devices. That's something we covered when we talked about your inventory of assets. So that when someone leaves, you can take a look at that inventory, you can take a look at what you've given them, and you can get them back. So it does talk about personnel and other interested parties. So this isn't just your own people. These are contractors and consultants that, again, you may have given assets. Those assets for other parties might also include, for instance, sales figures, blueprints, information that has allowed that person to support you in your organization. So you need to have these things back because from a financial perspective, of course, they cost money and you don't want to have to just go and buy another laptop and another mobile phone or another car for someone who's joining your organization. But of course, these assets contain information. So you want to have that information back. You want to have those assets back so that they can be controlled. Because if you don't have that in place, then of course you're going to have potentially a loss of, certainly a financial loss of the actual asset itself, but potentially there could be a data breach and a fine. So that's why it's required. So what will the auditor be looking for? Well, they'll be looking for an exit process. So you'll need to speak to your HR function. We'll talk about that in a second. But what the auditor is going to look for is first of all, an asset register. So you're tracking your assets. They'll want to see that there's a process in place for the return of those assets. They'll want to make sure that you're assessing those assets on an ongoing basis as well. And in particular, when it comes to your suppliers, they'll want to see within the contracts and the supplier agreements that it states something about the return of informational assets. This control doesn't require a specific policy. So the auditor is not going to be looking for a return of asset policy, but they will be looking for a procedure. And if you recall back to what the actual control states, it doesn't talk about having a documented process either. So the auditor will be looking for evidence that there is a process in place. And of course, if you have a checklist, that's great. The bigger you are as an organization and the more changes that are likely to happen, then that probably becomes more of a risk and therefore probably requires that level of rigor. But if you're a small business, as long as you can talk through what the process is, when someone leaves or someone changes employment, this is the process for return of those assets or for changing those particular assets. So what do you need to do? Well, first and foremost, you speak to your HR specialist or your HR function and find out, when someone leaves, how do we get their assets back? How do we get the car keys back of the company car that we gave them? How do we get the laptop back? How do we get the mobile phone back? So you're going to need to speak to your HR function or your specialist. Maybe the HR function is an outsourced function, in which case you still need to speak to them. So gather that information, find out what the process is. If there isn't a process in place because you are a really small organization, then you can define a process, you can document it. Again, it's not mandatory within the ISO standard. But if it helps for you just to have a 5-step process, then document it. Work with your HR function though. This isn't for you as a ISO 27001 specialist to just conjure up out of nowhere. You need to understand what happens in the business. So if I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. You need to communicate. You need good communication skills. Find out what reality is. Find out what's happening in the business and then document it. A simple checklist, a simple spreadsheet, more than sufficient. Just something that makes sure that the process is followed consistently, because that's what a process is for. Processes aren't just there to slow people down, which is a lot of people think they are. Processes are there to make sure that you do the right things, but you do the right things consistently. That's what a process is about. So as your business grows, that kind of process will develop and it will become probably a little bit more complex. The offboarding or the change of role process may become expanded. We cover that elsewhere. We talk about that in other controls. But here and now, the return of assets, what you need a process. There you are. So hopefully that has been helpful. If you have any questions, please do put them into the comments with your contact details and I will happily respond. On later controls, I'm considering just including some of the questions that we regularly get around some of these controls. Now, if you want more information about this particular Annex A control, we do write about it on our website, on our blogs. So please check that out as well at Consultants Like Us. But until next time, stay well, stay safe, stay connected, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, all the best. Bye.